She was trembling in the rain, 3 identical little girls huddled against her as blood trickled down her face. That's how I found her. Broken car steaming in the ditch. No one else for miles. I never imagined taking her hand that night would change everything. I never dreamed those 3 little girls with matching braids and frightened eyes would bring laughter back to my empty home. And I certainly never expected to discover that the man who destroyed my family's legacy 15 years ago, the businessman whose decisions cost my father everything, was their grandfather, or that he'd been watching us all along, orchestrating a second chance none of us knew we needed. My name is Kevin Harper. I'm just a mechanic trying to raise my son alone in a town too small for secrets. This is the story of how I helped an injured mother and her triplets, and uncovered the truth that would heal wounds deeper than we ever knew existed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The storm came without warning, the kind that transforms familiar roads into treacherous strangers. Rain hammered the tin roof of Carter's garage, where Kevin Harper wiped grease from calloused hands, his shoulders aching from a 10-hour shift. The clock on the wall, like everything else in Eagle Point, moved slower than it should. "Dad, can we go home now?" Caleb's voice carried from the small back office where he'd been drawing quietly, waiting as he always did, patient, too patient for an 8-year-old. Kevin glanced through the garage window at the darkening sky. "Just finishing up, buddy. 10 more minutes." Marvin Richards, 65 and stooped from decades beneath car hoods, looked up from his paperwork. "Go on, Harper. I'll lock up. That boy's been waiting long enough." Kevin nodded gratefully, grabbing his worn leather jacket from the hook. "Thanks, Marv. I owe you one." "You owe me about 300. But who's counting?" The older man chuckled, the lines around his eyes deepening. "Storm's getting nasty. Take the back roads home. Heard there's a tree down on Main." In the office, Caleb was carefully organizing colored pencils into a metal case, each one in its precise place. His sandy hair fell across his forehead as he concentrated, the spitting image of Rachel. The thought still hurt 3 years later. "Ready for adventure?" Kevin asked, forcing brightness into his voice. Caleb smiled, a small, cautious thing. "Can we have grilled cheese for dinner, with the crusts cut off? That's for babies, Dad." But the boy smiled wider, slipping his small hand into Kevin's larger one. They hurried through the rain to Kevin's truck, an aging blue Ford that protested with a cough before the engine caught. Windshield wipers struggled against the downpour. As they pulled onto the road, headlights cutting weak paths through sheets of water. "Mrs. Collins says I can help her garden tomorrow," Caleb said, watching raindrops race down his window. "That's so? Did you finish that math homework?" "Yeah, she helped me with fractions." Caleb twisted a loose thread on his jacket sleeve. "She made cookies too." Kevin felt the familiar tug of gratitude mixed with inadequacy. Irene Collins had become their unofficial grandmother since Rachel passed, watching Caleb after school when Kevin couldn't get away from the garage. A widowed schoolteacher with arthritic hands and seemingly boundless energy, she refused payment beyond occasional car repairs. "We should bring her something. Maybe—" Kevin's words died as the truck's headlights illuminated something in the distance. A car half submerged in the roadside ditch, steam rising from its crumpled hood despite the rain. "Dad, is someone hurt?" Kevin slowed, pulling to the shoulder. "Stay here. Lock the doors." He grabbed the flashlight from the glove compartment, its weight familiar in his palm. "I mean it, Caleb. Don't get out." The rain hit him like tiny needles as he approached the wrecked sedan. Newer model, silver city plates. Mud sucked at his boots with each step. The driver's side door was partially open, and as he drew closer, he saw her. A woman, maybe early 30s, dark hair plastered to her pale face. Blood ran in a thin stream from her hairline, diluted pink by rainwater. She was trying to pull herself from the car, one arm cradled protectively against her chest, and behind her, 3 identical faces peered out, eyes wide with terror. Little girls, maybe 7 years old, huddled together in the back seat. "Mom, don't move." Kevin reached her side, shining the light quickly over her injuries. "I'm Kevin Harper. Are you hurt badly?" "My arm," she whispered, teeth chattering. "The girls, I see them. They look okay from here." He crouched lower, rainwater soaking through his jeans. "What's your name?" "Sarah. Sarah Edwards." She tried to look back at the children. "The triplets. Hazel, Claire, Lillian. We were trying to reach Lakeview." Kevin assessed the situation quickly. The woman needed medical attention, but the nearest hospital was in Lakeview, 20 miles away. His truck could fit them all, but moving her might be dangerous. "Dad." Caleb's voice made him turn. The boy stood several feet away, rain darkening his jacket. "I told you to stay in the truck," Kevin said, sharper than he intended. "You need blankets. I brought them from the emergency kit." Caleb held out the space blankets Kevin kept behind the seat, his small face serious. Kevin softened. "Good thinking. Buddy, can you bring them closer?" Together they helped Sarah from the car, her face contorting with pain as she moved. The triplets emerged shakily, one by one, identical in their pink jackets and fear. "We have to get her to a hospital," Kevin told Caleb. "The bridge to Lakeview is flooded," Sarah said through gritted teeth. "We tried. That's why we were turning around." Kevin knew she was right. The creek bridge often washed out in heavy rains. Eagle Point's medical clinic would be closed this late, and Dr. Winters likely unreachable. "My house is 5 minutes from here," he decided. "I'll call Dr. Winters. From there, can you girls be brave and help your mom to my truck?" One of the triplets, he couldn't tell which, stepped forward. "I'm Hazel. I'm the oldest by 6 minutes. I'll help." Despite everything, Kevin found himself smiling. "Nice to meet you, Hazel. Let's get everyone warm and dry." The drive to his house was tense, with Sarah drifting in and out of awareness in the passenger seat. The triplets whispered among themselves in the back, sharing space with a wide-eyed Caleb. "Is she going to be okay?" Caleb asked, in a voice meant only for his father. Kevin glanced in the rearview mirror, meeting his son's worried gaze. "Dr. Winters will help her. She fixed your arm when you fell from the treehouse, remember?" Caleb nodded solemnly, then turned to the triplet nearest him. "My dad fixes cars, but he's good at fixing other stuff too." Kevin's modest 2-story home appeared through the rain, porch light still burning where he'd left it on that morning. He'd built the covered extension to the porch last summer, which now proved valuable as he parked as close to the door as possible. "Caleb, run ahead and open the door. Turn on all the lights and grab the first aid kit from the bathroom." Kevin carefully helped Sarah from the truck, while the triplets clustered around them, their identical faces blurred by rain and worry. Inside, Kevin settled Sarah on the living room couch, noticing how she tried to mask her pain when the girls were watching. He called Dr. Winters, relieved when she answered on the 3rd ring. "Natalie, it's Kevin Harper. I've got an emergency." Dr. Winters arrived 20 minutes later, medical bag in hand, her practical raincoat dripping on the entryway floor. She assessed Sarah efficiently, confirming what Kevin suspected: a broken arm, possible concussion, and various cuts and bruises. "The bridge is completely washed out," she told Kevin quietly as she prepared to set Sarah's arm. "Nobody's getting to Lakeview tonight, but she'll be okay. Nothing life-threatening." Caleb had taken charge of the triplets in the kitchen, showing them where cups were kept, helping them make hot chocolate. Kevin could hear their voices, Caleb's quiet instructions and the girls' hesitant questions. "You have a good boy there," Dr. Winters remarked, watching Kevin's gaze drift toward the kitchen. "Like his father." Kevin shook his head slightly. He's better than me. Gets that from his mother. After Sarah's arm was set and bandaged, after the children were settled with blankets and makeshift beds in the living room, Kevin finally had a moment alone with their unexpected guest. The triplets had fallen asleep on the pull-out couch, their identical faces peaceful at last, while Caleb had reluctantly gone upstairs to his own room. "I can't thank you enough," Sarah said softly. She sat at the kitchen table, cradling a cup of tea, her splintered arm resting carefully in her lap. Kevin shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. No, they wouldn't. Her eyes, a deep brown that seemed to hold more stories than she told, met his directly. "We've been on the road for 2 days, coming from Westbrook. We needed a fresh start." Something in her hesitation made Kevin wonder, but he didn't press. Everyone in Eagle Point had stories they kept close. His own sat heavy in his chest most days. "You and the girls can stay here until the road's clear," he offered. "It's not fancy, but it's dry." Sarah looked around the kitchen, at the children's drawings magnetized to the refrigerator, the chipped mugs hanging on hooks, the worn wooden table that had been in Kevin's family for generations. "It's a home," she said simply. "That's what matters." Later, after checking that everyone was asleep, Kevin stood at the kitchen window, watching the storm continue its assault. The phone call from Irene Collins had come just before bed. A tree had fallen on Sarah's car, crushing the passenger side completely. If they had stayed inside, Kevin rubbed his face, trying not to think about coincidences or fate or divine intervention. Rachel had believed in those things. He'd stopped when cancer took her anyway, despite prayers and bargains. With whatever might be listening, from the drawer beside the sink, he pulled out a notebook and pen. Budget was tight already, and now with 5 extra mouths to feed for who knew how long, he'd have to pick up extra shifts, maybe ask Marvin for an advance. A small noise made him turn. Caleb stood in the doorway in his faded dinosaur pajamas, looking younger than his 8 years. "Can't sleep, bud?" Caleb padded across the kitchen floor, leaning against his father's side. "The little girls look the same, but they're different too." Kevin smiled, wrapping an arm around his son's thin shoulders. "You noticed that already, huh?" "Hazel talks the most. Claire watches everything. Lillian had a book in her pocket the whole time. Pretty observant, Caleb Harper." The boy looked up at him. "Can they stay for breakfast? I can show them my treehouse if it stops raining." Kevin felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of a knot that had been there so long he'd forgotten what it felt like without it. "Yeah, buddy, they can stay for breakfast." Outside, the rain began to ease, the first stars appearing between breaks in the clouds. And somewhere across town, in a mansion few locals ever entered, an old man placed a phone receiver back in its cradle, nodding to himself before turning out the light. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Morning arrived with gentle persistence, sunlight filtering through curtains. Kevin hadn't remembered to close. He woke with a stiff neck, having spent the night in the weathered armchair that had been his father's favorite spot. For a moment, the house felt as it always did, quiet, empty of all but memories and routine. Then he heard it, the unmistakable sound of children's whispers, a girl's muffled giggle, his son's voice answering softly. Reality rushed back. The accident. Sarah Edwards. 3 identical little girls with matching braids. Kevin moved quietly, past the living room where Sarah still slept on the couch, her splintered arm resting on a pillow. The triplets were nowhere to be seen, but the sounds from the kitchen drew him forward. He paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. Caleb stood on a step stool at the counter, carefully pouring batter into a sizzling pan. Beside him, one of the triplets, Claire, he thought, though he couldn't be certain, handed him measuring spoons. Another, likely Hazel, was setting the table with more enthusiasm than precision. The third, Lillian, sat cross-legged on a chair reading the pancake mix instructions aloud. "You need to flip it now," she advised, squinting at the box. "When the bubbles pop." "I know," Caleb said, not unkindly. "My mom taught me before she went to heaven." A beat of silence followed his matter-of-fact statement. "Our dad's in heaven." "Two," Hazel offered, placing a fork down with unexpected gentleness. "He was a soldier." Caleb nodded, as though this explained everything. "That's why you only have a mom, like I only have a dad. The simple truth of children, exchanged without pretense or pity." Kevin felt something catch in his throat. "Need help, chefs?" he asked, stepping into the kitchen. Four heads turned simultaneously. Caleb's face brightened. "We're making breakfast for everybody. It was my idea." "Best idea I've heard all week." Kevin moved to the stove, checking the pancake that was now slightly darker than golden. "Looks like this one's ready to flip." They worked together in a chaotic harmony that felt both foreign and familiar. Kevin couldn't remember the last time the kitchen had contained this much life. Even on good days, breakfast with Caleb was a quiet affair, both of them still half asleep, communicating in nods and single words. "How many pancakes can you eat?" Hazel asked him directly, hands on her hips in a pose that made her seem decades older than 7. "3, Kevin answered. "Maybe 4 if they're as good as they smell. Mom can only eat 2. She says her stomach is smaller than her eyes. Is that right?" Kevin smiled, flipping another pancake onto the growing stack. "And how many can you eat, Miss Hazel?" 2.5, she declared confidently. "Claire eats 1.25, and Lillian eats 1, and asks for more later, when she thinks we're not looking." "I do not," Lillian protested, but her sisters exchanged knowing looks. A soft sound from the doorway made them all turn. Sarah Edwards stood there, hair tousled from sleep, her uninjured arm braced against the frame. Despite the bruising visible, along her temple, she was striking, not conventionally beautiful perhaps, but with a quiet strength in her features that commanded attention. "Mom!" The triplets rushed to her, their collective energy making Sarah wince slightly, even as she smiled. "Careful with your mother," Kevin cautioned gently. "Dr. Winters said she needs to rest that arm." Sarah met his eyes over her daughters' heads. "They're being very careful, and apparently making breakfast." "Caleb's teaching us how to flip," Claire offered, looking up at her mother with concern. "Does your arm hurt a lot?" "Not too bad, sweetheart." Sarah smoothed Claire's hair with her good hand. "Nothing that won't heal." Kevin pulled out a chair. "Breakfast is almost ready. Coffee? Please, black as it comes." She lowered herself carefully onto the chair, surveying the chaos of the kitchen with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry about all this. As soon as the road's clear—" "The bridge is still underwater," Kevin interrupted, pouring coffee into the least chipped mug he could find. "I called the sheriff's office already. Probably won't be passable until tomorrow at the earliest." "We don't mind," Caleb piped up, carrying a precariously balanced plate of pancakes to the table. "They can stay. Right, Dad?" Kevin nodded, recognizing the hopeful lift in his son's voice. "Of course. Stay as long as you need." After breakfast, Kevin helped Sarah to the living room sofa while the children washed dishes, or rather, splashed water enthusiastically in the general direction of the plates. Through the kitchen doorway, he could see Caleb showing the girls how to dry properly, his usual reserve replaced by patient instruction. "He's good with them," Sarah observed, following Kevin's gaze. "Most boys his age wouldn't have the patience." Kevin sat in the armchair opposite her, coffee mug warming his palms. "He's always been an old soul, even before—" He trailed off, unsure how much of his history to share with this stranger who had crashed into their lives. "Before you lost your wife?" Sarah asked gently. Kevin nodded, surprised at her directness. 3 years ago, Cancer. I'm sorry. She looked down at her splinted arm. Daniel, my husband, died in Afghanistan 4 years ago. The girls were just 3. They hardly remember him. The shared grief hung between them, neither uncomfortable nor intrusive, simply acknowledged. Your car's pretty badly damaged, Kevin said after a moment. Irene, my neighbor, called last night. A tree fell across it after we left. Sarah's eyes widened. If we'd stayed in it, yeah. Kevin didn't need to elaborate. The near miss was evident to both of them. Everything we own was in that car, she said quietly. Not much, just clothes and some keepsakes, the essentials. The statement raised questions Kevin didn't feel right asking. Instead, he said, I can drive you over there later, see what we can salvage. My truck has a tow hitch if you need to get the car to a shop. Thank you, but I can't afford repairs right now. Sarah's matter-of-factness held no self-pity. We'll figure something out. We always do. The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. Kevin wasn't used to visitors, especially not on Saturday mornings. He opened the door to find Irene. Collins on his porch, her silver hair nearly hidden beneath a practical rain hat, a large canvas tote bag in her arms. Kevin Harper, why didn't you tell me you had a house full of guests? She asked without preamble. I had to hear it from Betty at the pharmacy, who heard it from Officer Stevens, who responded to the accident report. Kevin couldn't help smiling. Eagle Point's gossip network remained undefeated in efficiency. Good morning to you too, Irene. It all happened pretty fast last night. Irene brushed past him, eyes already fixed on Sarah. You must be the poor dear who went off the road. I'm Irene Collins, Kevin's neighbor. I've brought some essentials. She placed the tote bag on the coffee table. Toiletries, some of my granddaughters, clothes that might fit you, and a few things for the little ones. Sarah looked momentarily overwhelmed by the woman's brisk kindness. That's incredibly thoughtful. I'm Sarah Edwards, and my daughters are triplets, I heard, 7 years old and identical as peas. How marvelous. Irene settled herself on the edge of the armchair. My Harold always wanted twins, but we just had the one daughter. Now tell me what else you need, dear. No arguments. Kevin retreated to check on the children, recognizing Irene's tone. The older woman had adopted him and Caleb after Rachel's death, arriving with casseroles and practical help disguised as neighborly visits. He'd learned resistance was futile. In the kitchen, he found all 4 children seated at the table, heads bent over paper and colored pencils. Caleb was showing the girls how to draw trees using different shades of green. Irene's here, he announced. She's brought some clothes and things for you girls. Lillian looked up. We need our backpacks from the car. Our books are in there. Hazel nodded emphatically. And Mr. Buttons. He's Claire's bear and she can't sleep without him. Claire didn't speak, but her worried eyes confirmed the importance of this missing toy. I'll go check on your car after lunch, Kevin promised. See what we can rescue. By afternoon, the sun had emerged fully, transforming Eagle Point into a glistening, rain-washed version of itself. Kevin drove to the accident site, leaving Sarah with Irene and the children engaged in an elaborate board game excavated from his closet. The silver sedan looked worse in daylight, the passenger side crushed beneath a fallen oak branch that would have required professional equipment to remove. Kevin circled the vehicle, assessing. The driver's side remained relatively intact. He managed to open the rear door, retrieving 3 small backpacks, a tattered teddy bear, and 2 suitcases from the back seat. The trunk yielded another suitcase and a box of photo albums, everything slightly damp but salvageable. In the glove compartment, he found insurance papers and registration. The car was registered to Sarah Edwards, but the insurance had lapsed last month. Kevin sighed, knowing what this meant for her. No insurance, no money for repairs, and from what he could gather, no real destination beyond a fresh start. He loaded everything into his truck, stopping briefly at Carter's garage to speak with Marvin about possibly towing the sedan later. When he returned home, he found Sarah seated on the porch swing, watching the children play in the yard. The triplets were attempting cartwheels, their identical pink shirts blurring in matching arcs. Caleb demonstrated with surprising agility, his usual caution forgotten in the joy of having playmates. "Found quite a bit," Kevin said, placing the salvaged items beside her, including one very important bear. Sarah's relief was palpable. "Thank you. Claire will be ecstatic." She ran her fingers over the damp photo album. "These matter more than anything else. Our history." Kevin nodded, understanding completely. After Rachel died, photographs became precious lifelines to memories, already beginning to blur at the edges. "The car's not good news," he admitted. "Tree did a lot of damage." Sarah nodded, resignation in her expression. "I figured as much, just when we were so close to starting over." Starting over where? The question slipped out before Kevin could reconsider. Sarah was quiet for a moment, watching her daughters laugh with Caleb. "Lakeview, I hoped. It's small enough to be affordable, big enough to find work. I've been offered a position at the elementary school library. Nothing fancy, but it comes with health insurance." She looked down at her splintered arm. "Or it did. I was supposed to start Monday." Kevin absorbed this information, mentally calculating distances and logistics. "Lakeview's only 20 minutes from here, once the bridge is fixed, I mean. It might as well be another country without transportation." Sarah's practical tone couldn't quite mask her distress. "But we've faced worse. We'll figure it out." Before Kevin could respond, a pickup truck he didn't recognize pulled into his driveway. A man in a delivery uniform stepped out, carrying a large box. "Delivery for Edwards?" the man called, checking his clipboard. Sarah looked bewildered. "That's me, but I didn't order anything." The delivery man shrugged. "Says here it's already paid for. Just need a signature." He handed her a digital pad, which she awkwardly signed with her left hand. The box, when opened on the porch swing, contained children's clothing. Practical items in the correct sizes for all three girls, including new rain boots and jackets. At the bottom lay an envelope with a check made out to Sarah Edwards for exactly the amount needed to renew her car insurance, plus a note on expensive stationery that read simply, "A small welcome to the area. Your new position will wait until you're recovered." "I don't understand," Sarah whispered, staring at the check. "Who would—" "Mom, look," Hazel called, the triplets having abandoned their cartwheels to investigate the box. "These are just like the ones we saw in the store window." Sarah looked at Kevin, confusion and wariness battling in her expression. "I don't know anyone here, except you and Dr. Winters. And Irene, I suppose." Kevin examined the envelope, finding no return address, nothing to indicate its source. "Someone who knows you were coming to Lakeview. Someone who knows about the job." The children were delightedly examining their new clothes, oblivious to the adults' concern. "It feels like—" Sarah hesitated. "Charity," Kevin supplied. "No, like being watched." She placed the check back in the envelope. "I'm not sure whether to be grateful or concerned." Kevin understood her unease. In his experience, unexpected gifts often came with unexpected price tags. Yet he couldn't deny the practical value of the items or the obvious joy they brought the girls. "Maybe it's just someone who heard about the accident," he suggested, though he didn't entirely believe it himself. Eagle Point was small, but anonymous. Generosity on this scale was unusual. That evening, after a dinner of spaghetti that all four children helped prepare, the triplets insisted on modeling their new clothes. Sarah, looking more rested but still puzzled by the mysterious delivery, applauded each fashion show entry with her good arm. Later, after the children were settled for bed, the triplets again on the pull-out couch, Caleb upstairs, Kevin found Sarah studying the note once more under the living room lamp. "The handwriting looks familiar somehow," she murmured, "but I can't place it." Kevin sat beside her, their shoulders almost touching in the soft lamplight. You mentioned a fresh start earlier. Are you running from something, Sarah? She looked up, her expression guarded but not angry at the direct question. Not the way you might think. No abusive relationship, no legal troubles, just painful memories, a life that didn't work out the way I planned. Kevin nodded, understanding more than she might realize. Eagle Point's full of those stories, mine included. Sarah's eyes searched his face. Does it get easier building something new? Some days. Kevin's honesty felt right, necessary between them. Other days I still reach for Rachel's hand when I wake up. Sarah nodded, a shared comprehension passing between them. The girls keep me moving forward. Without them, I might have just stopped. Children have a way of demanding that we keep going, Kevin agreed, even when we don't want to. Outside, an owl called into the night, its lonely sound carrying through the partially open window. In the quiet that followed, Kevin became acutely aware of how long it had been since he'd sat with someone like this, sharing truthful words in comfortable silence. Whatever you're running toward, he said finally, I hope you find it. Sarah smiled, the first full smile he'd seen from her. Tonight, at least, we found a safe place to rest. That's more than I expected yesterday. Upstairs, the stairs creaked softly. Kevin looked up to see Caleb standing in his pajamas, clutching his pillow. Dad, can the girls come up to my room tomorrow? I want to show them my model airplanes. If their mom says it's okay, Kevin answered, catching Sarah's nod. Caleb hesitated, then asked, Are they staying again tomorrow night? Kevin looked at Sarah, leaving the answer to her. Just one more night, she said gently, until we figure things out. Caleb nodded, seeming satisfied. Good, because they laugh at my jokes, even the bad ones. After he'd gone back upstairs, Sarah turned to Kevin. He's a special boy. You're doing a wonderful job with him. Most days I feel like I'm just trying not to mess up too badly, Kevin admitted. That's all any of us are doing, Sarah replied. Some just hide it better than others. In the quiet house, with children sleeping above and beside them, Kevin felt the first tentative threads of connection stretching between their separate griefs, their parallel journeys. Not romance, it was far too soon for that, but understanding, recognition. Neither noticed the dark sedan parked down the street, or the driver who had been watching the house since sunset, taking notes in a leather-bound journal before, finally driving away. Sunday dawned clear and promising, the aftermath of the storm visible only in scattered branches and the lingering puddles that reflected a cloudless sky. Kevin woke to the unfamiliar sound of laughter floating up from downstairs, high musical notes, punctuated by Caleb's deeper chuckle. For a moment he lay still, savoring the sound like a man who'd forgotten the taste of sugar until it touched his tongue again. In the kitchen, he found a scene of controlled chaos. Sarah was attempting to make pancakes one-handed, while the triplets orbited around her, each with an assigned task. Hazel mixed batter with fierce concentration. Claire carefully arranged plates on the table, and Lillian read aloud from a recipe book propped against the toaster. Caleb was setting out napkins, folded into triangles the way Rachel had always done. The bridge is open, Kevin announced after his first sip of coffee. He'd checked the county emergency updates on his phone while still upstairs. They cleared. It an hour ago, 5 pairs of eyes turned to him. Only Sarah's held understanding of what this meant. So, we can go to Lakeview now? She asked. Spatula paused mid-flip. Kevin nodded. Roads are clear. I can drive you whenever you're ready. Beat of silence followed, broken by Claire's small voice. But we just made friends. Hazel put down her mixing spoon with uncharacteristic gentleness. We always have to leave when we make friends. Sarah's face softened with a complicated mixture of regret and resolve. Girls, we talked about this. The new job, the new school. I Can drive you to look at rentals today, Kevin interrupted, surprising himself. Help you get settled, no rush. The relief in Sarah's eyes was worth whatever inconvenience this might cause. That would be... Thank you. After breakfast, Kevin called Marvin to let him know he'd be late to work tomorrow. The old mechanic grunted. In what passed for approval. Take the day if you need it. Johnson cancelled his transmission work anyway. While Sarah helped the girls pack their few belongings, Kevin took Caleb aside in the backyard. His son's face already showed the resignation of a child who understood that good things were temporary. Are they leaving forever? Caleb asked, kicking at a tuft of grass. Kevin crouched to eye level, a position that was becoming harder on his knees each year. They're moving to Lakeview, not the moon. It's 20 minutes away, but we won't see them again, like Mom. The comparison caught Kevin off guard. That's different, buddy. Your mom, she didn't have a choice. He placed his hands on Caleb's shoulders. Sarah and the girls will still be nearby. Maybe we can visit sometimes. Caleb considered this, his small face serious beneath tousled morning hair. Promise? Kevin hesitated, wary of guarantees he couldn't keep. I promise we'll try. This conditional oath seemed to satisfy Caleb, who nodded once before running back inside to help the triplets gather their things. By mid-morning, Kevin's truck was loaded with the salvage suitcases and the box of new clothes. The triplets sat in the back seat with Caleb, while Sarah rode up front, her splintered arm cradled carefully against her body. The drive to Lakeview was filled with the children's chatter, pointing out landmarks and creating stories about cloud shapes visible through the windows. Lakeview was larger than Eagle Point, though still modest by any standard. It boasted a proper downtown with shops, a movie theater, and a community college branch campus. Kevin drove slowly down Main Street, allowing Sarah to orient herself. The elementary school should be on Cedar Avenue, she said, consulting a printed map she'd pulled from her purse. The apartment listings I found online were mostly near there. The elementary school was a cheerful brick building with a well-maintained playground. As they drove past, Sarah pointed it out to the triplets. That's where you'll go to school, and where I'll be working in the library. Will they have the same books as our old school? Lillian asked, pressing her face to the window. Different. Ones probably. That means new stories to discover. Kevin found himself smiling at her gentle optimism, the way she consistently framed change as opportunity for her daughters. It was a skill he still struggled to master with Caleb. The first apartment they visited was a disappointment, dingy and overpriced, with a landlord whose eyes lingered too long on Sarah's splintered arm, clearly calculating potential problems. The second was bright but tiny, with barely enough space for a single child, let alone 3. By the third viewing, the triplets were getting restless, and Caleb had retreated into the silence that signaled he was overwhelmed. Maybe we should take a break, Kevin suggested, as they left the third, unsuitable apartment. Find somewhere for lunch. Sarah looked relieved at the suggestion. There's a diner on the corner that looks kid-friendly. The Eagle's Nest Diner welcomed them with the scent of fresh coffee and grilling burgers. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with a name tag reading Linda, showed them to a corner booth with extra space for the children. 4 little ones, she remarked, distributing children's menus with a smile. You've got your hands full. Neither Kevin nor Sarah corrected the assumption that they were a family unit. It seemed simpler not to explain. Over grilled cheese sandwiches and chocolate milkshakes, the mood lightened. The children invented a game involving sugar packets, and Sarah's tense expression relaxed into occasional laughter. Kevin found himself noticing details about her, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when thinking, how her smile reached her eyes when genuine. Mr. Harper. Kevin looked up to find a man in his 60s standing beside their table, impeccably dressed in a suit that cost more than Kevin made in a month. I'm James Wilson, assistant to Mr. Montgomery. The man's polished voice matched his. Appearance. I believe you did some work on Mr. Montgomery's vintage Corvette last year. Kevin vaguely recalled the job, a rare classic car that Marvin had insisted Kevin handle personally. The owner had never appeared, sending this same assistant. Instead, "That's right," Kevin replied, shaking the offered hand. "Is there a problem with it?" "Not at all. In fact, Mr. Montgomery was most impressed with your work." Wilson glanced at Sarah and the children with polite interest. "I apologize for interrupting your family meal." "Oh, we're not," Kevin began, but Wilson was already continuing. "Mr. Montgomery wondered if you might be available for another project. He's recently acquired a 1965 Mustang in need of restoration. He specifically requested you." Kevin blinked, surprised by the offer. Classic car restoration paid significantly better than routine repairs. "I'd need to check with my boss, but I'm definitely interested." Wilson nodded, producing a business card from an inner pocket. "Excellent. Please call this number when you've confirmed your availability. Mr. Montgomery is prepared to make it worth your while." After Wilson departed, Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Friends in high places?" Kevin shook his head, tucking the card into his wallet. "Hardly. Never even met the man. Alexander Montgomery owns half the properties in this county, but he's practically a recluse. Lives in that big estate on the hill outside Lakeview." "The Richardson estate?" "We passed it on the way in. It looked like something from a movie." Kevin nodded. "Been in his family for generations. My dad used to talk about the Montgomerys, old money, big influence in local politics, and he specifically asked for you." "That's quite a compliment." Kevin shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. "Just lucky, I guess. Anyway, it would be good. Money, if it works out." After lunch, they resumed apartment hunting with renewed energy. The fourth option, a small house on a quiet street 6 blocks from the school, seemed promising until the rental agent mentioned the steep security deposit. "It's owner mandated," the agent explained apologetically. "First and last month's rent plus the deposit comes to $3,800 due at signing." Sarah's face fell, though she maintained a neutral expression for the children's benefit. "I see. That's beyond my current budget, I'm afraid." Kevin watched her straighten her shoulders, preparing to ask about less expensive options. Before she could speak, the agent's phone rang. "Excuse me," she said, stepping aside to answer. Her expression shifted from professional detachment to surprise as she listened. "Yes, sir, I understand. Right away." She ended the call and turned back to them with an entirely different demeanor. "That was the property owner," she explained. "There's been a change in policy. For qualified tenants with children, the security deposit is being waived and the first month's rent is reduced by half. Educational professionals receive priority consideration." Sarah stared at her. "That seems very specific." The agent smiled brightly. "New community initiative. The owner is quite committed to attracting quality residents, especially those in education. Shall we proceed with the application?" Kevin caught Sarah's eye, seeing his own suspicion mirrored there. This was no coincidence, coming immediately after their encounter with Wilson. But with 3 tired children and limited options, Sarah nodded her agreement. The application process was surprisingly swift. By late afternoon, Sarah had been approved for the rental, with a move-in date set for the following day. The agent handed her the keys with a flourish. "Welcome to Lakeview, Miss Edwards. I think you'll be very happy here." Outside on the sidewalk, Sarah turned the keys over in her palm, her expression a mixture of relief and wariness. "This doesn't make sense. Something's happening here that I don't understand." Kevin nodded, equally puzzled by the turn of events. "It's definitely unusual, but it's also a good house in a safe neighborhood close to the school. With a rent I can actually afford on a school librarian's salary." Sarah's practical nature seemed to win out over her suspicion. "The girls need stability. I can't look a gift horse in the mouth right now. They decided to drive back to Eagle Point to collect the remainder of Sarah's belongings and spend one more night where the children were already comfortable. On the return journey, Caleb and the triplets fell asleep in the back seat, lulled by motion and emotional exhaustion. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly as Kevin drove through the late afternoon sunlight. "For everything." Kevin glanced at her, then back at the road. "Hasn't been much, really. It's been everything to us. A safe place when we needed it most." She gazed out the window at the passing fields. The girls haven't slept that well in months. They rode in comfortable silence for several minutes before Sarah spoke again. "Do you ever feel like you're being guided somehow? Like invisible hands are arranging things?" Kevin considered this. After Rachel died, he'd rejected any notion of divine plans or cosmic meaning. What purpose could her suffering possibly have served? But these recent events did have an orchestrated quality that was difficult to dismiss. "I don't know about guided," he said finally, "but I do sometimes think there are connections we don't see until later, looking back." Sarah nodded, seeming to understand what he couldn't fully articulate. "When Daniel died, I was so angry at the universe, at God, at the military. Then one day, Hazel asked me if Daddy was watching over us, and I realized, what did it matter? What I believed? My girls needed to feel protected, not abandoned." Kevin thought of Caleb's question about his mother, the careful explanations he'd constructed over years. Kids have a way of cutting through the philosophical noise. They do. Sarah smiled softly. "Sometimes I think they know more than we do." Back in Eagle Point, Kevin pulled into his driveway just as Irene Collins emerged from her house across the street, waving energetically. "Perfect timing," she called. "I've made a casserole for dinner. Figured you could all use a home-cooked meal." Over dinner at Kevin's kitchen table, Sarah explained their successful housing search to an attentive Irene. She carefully omitted the mysterious circumstances surrounding the rental terms, but Kevin noticed her hesitation when describing the community initiative discount. "That's wonderful news," Irene declared. "Though we'll miss having you here, won't we, Kevin?" Kevin nodded, avoiding direct eye contact with Sarah. "Lakeview's not far. Maybe the kids can get together sometimes." "Absolutely," Irene agreed. "In fact, I volunteer at the Lakeview Library twice a month. I could easily drop in to see how you're settling in." After dinner, while Irene helped the children make decorative paper chains at the kitchen table, "For your new home, dears," Kevin took a phone call from Marvin Richards. "You're not going to believe this," the old mechanic said without preamble. "That Montgomery fellow sent a tow truck for the Edwards woman's car this afternoon. It's sitting in our service bay right now." "What?" Kevin lowered his voice, stepping onto the back porch for privacy. "Who authorized that?" "Came with paperwork signed by her insurance company. Apparently her policy was reinstated this morning, backdated to cover the accident." Kevin pinched the bridge of his nose. "That's convenient. There's more," Marvin continued. "Montgomery's paying for full repairs, top priority. Says he wants it done by Wednesday at the latest." "Did he say why?" "Nope. Just that the bill goes to him, not her." "Oh, and there's an envelope here for her, with temporary insurance cards inside." After ending the call, Kevin leaned against the porch railing, trying to make sense of it all. The mysterious gifts, the convenient rental, and now the car repairs, all pointing to one conclusion. Alexander Montgomery, for reasons unknown, had taken a personal interest in Sarah Edwards and her daughters. The question was why. Kevin returned inside to find Sarah helping Claire with her paper chain. The little girl's tongue protruded slightly as she concentrated on gluing colored strips together. The scene was so domestic, so natural, that Kevin hesitated to disrupt it with his news. Later, after Irene had gone home and the children were tucked in for their last night under Kevin's roof, he told Sarah about the car. "This is beyond strange," she whispered, sinking onto the couch beside him. "I've never met Alexander Montgomery. Why would he do this?" "I'm not sure," Kevin admitted, "but I intend to find out. When I work on his Mustang, I'll ask some questions." Sarah's fingers twisted together in her lap. "I should be grateful, I suppose. The car, the apartment, it solves so many problems." She looked up at him, her expression troubled. "But I can't help feeling like there are strings attached that I can't see." "You don't have to accept any of it," Kevin pointed out. "You could walk away." "And go where? Do what?" She gestured toward the living room where her daughters slept. "They deserve stability. If someone wants to provide that, even anonymously." She sighed. "I just wish I understood why." Kevin reached over impulsively and covered her hand with his. "Whatever's happening, you're not alone in this. I'm just 20 minutes away." Sarah turned her hand to squeeze his briefly, the simple human contact conveying more than words could. 20 minutes is nothing," she agreed. They sat together in the quiet house, listening to the rhythmic breathing of sleeping children and the subtle creaks of settling floorboards. Tomorrow would bring change again, a new home, new beginnings, new questions. But tonight, in the stillness between what had been and what would be, there was only this moment of connection, this tentative bridge between separate lives. Outside in the darkness, unseen by either of them, a car turned slowly at the end of the street, headlights briefly illuminating the porch before continuing on its silent journey into the night. Monday morning arrived with the brisk efficiency of ordinary life resuming its rhythm. Kevin rose before dawn, the habit of years etched into his body's clock. The house felt different, emptier somehow, the absence of Sarah and her daughters more noticeable than their brief presence should have warranted. He moved through his morning routine with mechanical precision, making only 2 pieces of toast instead of the small mountain that had fed yesterday's breakfast table. Caleb emerged from his room clutching something in his hand, hair tousled from sleep. "Did they already leave?" "Not yet, buddy. They're still sleeping." Kevin poured milk into Caleb's cereal bowl. "We'll drive them to their new place after breakfast." Caleb nodded, sliding into his chair. He opened his hand to reveal 3 small, intricately folded paper cranes. "I made these last night, one for each of them." Kevin touched one delicate creation with a fingertip. "Your mom taught you how to make these." "I remember." Caleb arranged them in a neat row beside his bowl. "She," said Cranes, "bring luck to new homes." The memory caught Kevin unaware. Rachel, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, patiently guiding Caleb's small fingers through the folds. He'd forgotten that detail among the thousands that made up their life together. It struck him. Now how many such memories might be slipping away, unmarked and unpreserved? "That's a thoughtful gift," he managed, ruffling Caleb's hair. The move to Lakeview proceeded with unexpected ease. Sarah's meager possessions fit into Kevin's truck in a single load, and the triplets chatted excitedly about their new rooms. All the way there, the rental house, modest but welcoming in morning light, stood ready to receive them, its small front yard bordered by daffodils just beginning to show green shoots. "It's perfect," Sarah said quietly as she unlocked the front. Johor, the children rushing past her to explore. "I still can't believe our luck." Kevin carried boxes inside, arranging them in the living room, while Sarah directed the girls in choosing bedrooms. Caleb followed, quiet but engaged, his paper cranes safely delivered to their recipients. By mid-morning, the essentials were unpacked, beds assembled, and the kitchen functional enough for Sarah to make sandwiches for lunch. "I have to head to work," Kevin said apologetically, checking his watch. "Marvin's already short-handed today." Sarah nodded, understanding in her eyes. "We've imposed on you enough. The girls and I can handle the rest." "It's not an imposition." The words came quickly, surprising even himself. "It's been nice. Having the house feel lived in again. A Flicker of something passed across Sarah's face, recognition perhaps of the weight his words carried. Before either could elaborate, the triplets tumbled back into the kitchen, Caleb trailing behind them. "Dad, can we come back on Saturday?" he asked. "Hazel says there's a park nearby with a pond." Kevin glanced at Sarah, who smiled her assent. "Sure, if Miss Edwards doesn't mind." "It's just Sarah," she corrected gently, "and we'd love the company. I start work at the school library tomorrow, but Saturday would be perfect." The goodbye that followed was easier with this promise of continuation. Kevin watched Caleb exchange elaborate handshakes with each triplet, apparently a secret ritual they'd developed in their brief time together. Sarah walked them to the truck, her splinted arm adorned with a bright scarf the girls had tied. "Around it. Thank you again," she said simply. "For everything," Kevin nodded, suddenly awkward in the finality of the moment. "I'll call when the car's ready. Shouldn't be more than a couple of days, according to Marvin. No rush. We can walk to school from here." She hesitated, then added, "You have my number, if you need anything, or even if you don't." The drive back to Eagle Point was quieter. Caleb lost in thought beside him. Work at Carter's garage absorbed Kevin's afternoon. Oil changes, a transmission flush, the mundane tasks that paid the bills but offered little challenge to his skills. It was nearly closing time when Marvin appeared at his elbow, wiping his hands on a shop rag. Montgomery's assistant called again. "Says the old man wants to meet you in person about that Mustang job." Kevin straightened from under the hood of a sedan. "When?" "Tonight. 7 o'clock at the estate." Marvin raised bushy eyebrows. "Must really want that car fixed right." Kevin glanced at the clock. Just enough time to pick up Caleb from Irene's. "Get him dinner and make it to the Richardson estate by 7. Did he say why the urgency?" "Nope, but he's paying double your usual rate, plus a bonus for after-hours consultation." Marvin shrugged. "Can't hurt to hear what he has to say." The Richardson estate sprawled across 30 acres of immaculately maintained grounds on the outskirts of Lakeview. An intricate wrought-iron gate marked the entrance, opening automatically as Kevin's truck approached. He drove slowly up the winding driveway, feeling increasingly out of place as the grand house came into view. A 3-story manor of weathered stone and gleaming windows. James Wilson waited on the front steps, his posture as precise as his tailored suit. "Mr. Harper, thank you for coming on such short notice. Mr. Montgomery is in the garage pavilion." Kevin followed Wilson across a cobblestone courtyard to a separate structure built to complement the main house. Unlike the residential opulence, the garage interior was a temple to automotive appreciation. Polished concrete floors, state-of-the-art lifts, and tools organized with military precision. 6 classic cars stood in various states of completeness, each a museum-worthy specimen. At the far end, beneath directed lighting, a 1965 Mustang convertible in faded red paint occupied a central position. Beside it stood a tall figure in expensive but casual clothing, pressed chinos, a button-down shirt with rolled sleeves, revealing forearms mapped with age spots and history. Alexander Montgomery turned as they approached, his face weathered but dignified, silver hair neatly trimmed. "Mr. Harper," he said, extending a hand. His voice carried the measured cadence of someone accustomed to being listened to. "Thank you for coming. I've heard excellent things about your work." Kevin shook the offered hand, noting the strength still present in the older man's grip. "Mr. Montgomery, that's a beautiful Mustang you've got there." Montgomery smiled slightly, gesturing toward the car. "My first restoration project in years. I used to do this work myself before time and arthritis intervened." He flexed his fingers demonstratively. "Now I find I need skilled hands to execute what my mind still envisions." Kevin moved toward the vehicle, professional interest overriding his initial discomfort. The Mustang was a genuine classic, its potential visible beneath the faded paint and worn upholstery. Original engine? Yes, though it needs significant rebuilding. The transmission as well. Montgomery stepped closer, his enthusiasm evident. I'd like period-correct restoration where possible, with carefully selected modern improvements for safety and reliability. For the next 30 minutes, they discussed specifics of the restoration. Kevin growing more engaged as his expertise was not only respected, but actively sought. Montgomery clearly knew cars. The questions he asked were informed, specific, and occasionally challenging. Kevin found himself forgetting the circumstances that had brought him here, absorbed instead. In the technical conversation, "You have a genuine understanding," Montgomery remarked, watching Kevin examine the engine compartment. "That's increasingly rare. Where did you learn?" "My father." Kevin straightened, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "He owned Harper's Garage in Eagle Point for 30 years before he died. Taught me everything from the time I could hold a wrench. Harper's Garage." Montgomery's expression shifted subtly. "On Maple Street? I remember it." Something in the older man's tone caught Kevin's attention. "You knew my father?" "Not personally." Montgomery turned slightly, examining a nearby tool cabinet with sudden interest. "But I was familiar with most businesses in the county. Your father had an excellent reputation." Kevin studied the older man, an uneasy feeling settling in his chest. "He did, until the bank foreclosed on his loan and he lost everything." Montgomery's shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. After a moment, he said, "The business climate was difficult during that period. Many established enterprises suffered." "It wasn't the economy that killed my father's business?" The words emerged sharper than Kevin intended. It was Montgomery Financial Services calling in loans throughout the county to fund expansion projects. The pieces clicked into place with sudden clarity. Montgomery Financial, the holding company that had acquired his father's loan from the local bank, then refused extensions during a temporary downturn. The same company whose letterhead had appeared on the final foreclosure notice. The company, owned by this man standing before him. Your father's garage was one of many. Montgomery turned to face him directly. "Business decisions are rarely personal, Mr. Harper." "It was personal to my father." Kevin stepped back from the Mustang, his excitement about the project evaporating. He built that garage from nothing. The stress of losing it gave him his first heart attack. The second one killed him 6 months later. Montgomery's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Not guilt exactly, but recognition. "I remember the Harper loan specifically because I reviewed it personally after the fact. It was one of several decisions I came to regret." The admission, unexpected and unembellished, momentarily derailed Kevin's anger. "Why am I here, Mr. Montgomery? Why did you request me specifically for this job? Because you're the best mechanic in the county, by all accounts." Montgomery moved to a small refrigerator in the corner of the garage, retrieving 2 bottles of water and offering one to Kevin. "And because I believe in second chances," Kevin ignored the offered water. "And Sarah Edwards, the mysterious financial help, the rental house, the car repairs. What's your interest in her family?" A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft hum of the climate control system maintaining optimal conditions for the valuable cars. "You've grown quite protective of them in a short time," Montgomery observed finally. "They've had enough hardship without becoming pawns in whatever game you're playing." Montgomery sighed, setting both water bottles aside. "No game, Mr. Harper, a responsibility. One I've neglected for too long." He gestured toward a seating area in the corner of the garage. "Please sit. There are things you should understand." Kevin hesitated, then followed Montgomery to the comfortable leather chairs positioned around a small table. The older man lowered, himself carefully, the stiffness in his movements betraying his age, despite his otherwise vigorous appearance. Daniel Edwards was married to my daughter Caroline. Montgomery began without preamble. I disowned her when she chose him over the future I had planned for her. It was, he paused, examining his hands, the greatest mistake of my life. Kevin sat perfectly still, absorbing this revelation. Sarah's husband, the triplets' father. Montgomery nodded once. Caroline died in childbirth. The triplets survived. Daniel raised them alone, with no help from me. My pride wouldn't allow it. His voice remained steady, but a muscle worked in his jaw. When Daniel was deployed to Afghanistan, he wrote to me, asked me to reconnect with my granddaughters in case something happened to him. And you refused. I never answered his letter. Montgomery's admission hung in the air between them. When he was killed in action 4 years ago, Sarah tried to contact me. I had my assistant turn her away. Kevin felt cold anger building again. Those little girls are your flesh and blood. You abandoned them when they needed you most. Yes. The simple acknowledgement contained no excuses, no justification. I've spent the last 4 years regretting my choices. 6 months ago, I hired an investigator to find them. They'd moved 5 times in 3 years, each situation more precarious than the last. So now you're trying to what? Buy your way back into their lives with anonymous gifts and manipulated housing markets? Kevin's contempt spilled into his tone. Does Sarah even know who you are? No. Montgomery met his gaze directly. And she has every reason to refuse any contact if she did. I've been watching, waiting for the right moment to approach them. He hesitated, then added, the accident seemed providential, bringing them not only to Lakeview as Sarah had planned, but specifically into your path. Kevin frowned. What does that have to do with anything? I've been aware of you for some time, Mr. Harper. Your father's garage was one of several business foreclosures that led me to reevaluate many aspects of my life. Montgomery's fingers tapped lightly on the armrest. When I learned that Robert Harper's son had become an exceptional mechanic despite the hardships my company caused your family, I felt a certain responsibility. Guilt, you mean? A thin smile touched Montgomery's lips. Perhaps. Regardless, I've followed your progress. Your struggle as a single father after your wife's passing, your dedication to your son, when Sarah and my granddaughters quite literally crashed into your life, it seemed significant. Kevin absorbed this, trying to reconcile his lingering anger with the complicated man before him. Why tell me all this now? Because Sarah trusts you. The girls have connected with your son. You're in a position to help facilitate a relationship that I've damaged perhaps beyond repair. Montgomery leaned forward slightly. I don't expect forgiveness, Mr. Harper, but those girls deserve to know their heritage, their family history. Sarah deserves financial security after years of struggling alone. That should be her choice, not yours, or mine. Of course. Montgomery nodded. But she needs the truth first. The complete truth, including my role in your father's financial ruin. He paused. I'd like your help in approaching them. Not as an ally, I wouldn't ask that of you, but as someone who can ensure the conversation happens fairly, on neutral ground. Kevin stood, needing distance to process everything he'd heard. The Mustang gleamed under the lights, a project that now carried implications far beyond restoration. I need time to think about this. I understand. Montgomery remained seated, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. The restoration job is yours, regardless of your decision about Sarah. No strings attached. Kevin moved toward the garage door, then paused. Those girls, your granddaughters, they're extraordinary. Hazel stands up for her sisters like she's been doing it since birth. Claire notices everything around her, takes it all in. And Lillian, she's reading at a level that would impress any teacher. Something shifted in Montgomery's expression. Hunger, perhaps, for details of the family he'd rejected. Thank you for telling me that. I didn't say it for you. Kevin's words were blunt but not unkind. I said it for them, so you understand what you've missed and what you stand to lose. Again, if your intentions aren't genuine, the drive back to Eagle Point gave Kevin time to process what he'd learned. The revelation of Montgomery's connection to Sarah explained the mysterious assistance, but created a new moral quandary. Did he have the right to withhold this information from her, or the obligation to share it? Montgomery's involvement in his father's financial ruin complicated matters further, tangling personal history with present responsibility. At home, he found Caleb already asleep, Irene Collins knitting quietly in the living room. She looked up as he entered, her keen eyes. Noting his troubled expression, "Rough meeting?" she asked, setting her needles aside. Kevin sank into the opposite chair. "You could say that. Found out some things I didn't expect." Irene nodded sagely. "About Sarah and those girls, I'd wager." He looked up sharply. "What do you know about it?" "Nothing specific." Irene resumed her knitting, the needles clicking softly. "But I've lived in this county for 70 years. I remember when Caroline Montgomery ran off with a young army officer against her father's wishes. The old man nearly tore the town apart, looking for her before she sent word she'd married. He disowned her publicly at the church social." Kevin stared at her. "And you didn't think to mention this when they were staying here?" Irene's needles never faltered. "Not my story to tell. Dear. Besides, I wasn't certain until I saw the little one, Lillian. She has Caroline's eyes, exactly. And the way Hazel stands with her hands on her hips," she smiled slightly. "Pure Alexander Montgomery, right down to the chin tilt." "Sarah doesn't know," Kevin said, "about any of it. I gathered as much." Irene tied off a row of stitches. "The question is, what will you do with what you know?" Kevin ran a hand through his hair, the weight of the decision settling heavily across his shoulders. "I don't know yet, but she deserves the truth, however complicated it might be." Outside, rain began to fall again, gentle but persistent against the windows. Somewhere across town, Sarah was likely tucking her daughters into new beds in their new home, unaware of the history waiting to reshape their future. Kevin thought of Montgomery, alone in his mansion full of restored treasures, seeking to repair what might be irreparable. Some damage, once done, left permanent marks in machinery and in lives. But Kevin had built his career on the belief that with the right tools, enough patience and skilled hands, almost anything could be restored to function. Whether relationships could be rebuilt with the same techniques remained to be seen. Tuesday morning dawned with indecision hanging over Kevin like a persistent fog. He moved through his routine mechanically, making lunches, checking Caleb's homework, all while Montgomery's revelations circled in his mind like buzzards. The right choice remained elusive. Tell Sarah everything immediately, or wait for a more appropriate moment. Or perhaps it wasn't his place to tell her at all. "You're quiet," Caleb observed, munching on his cereal. "Is it because of Mr. Montgomery?" Kevin nearly spilled his coffee. "What do you know about Mr. Montgomery?" "Mrs. Collins told me he's very rich and lives in the big house on the hill." Caleb stirred his cereal thoughtfully, "and that he might be the triplets' grandfather, but it's a secret." Kevin made a mental note to have a word with Irene about appropriate topics to discuss with an 8-year-old. "Mrs. Collins shouldn't have. She didn't say it to me," Caleb clarified. "She was talking on the phone and I heard her. I wasn't spying." he added quickly. I was getting cookies, and she was in the living room. Kevin sighed, pulling out a chair to sit across from his son. Sometimes, grown-up situations are complicated, buddy. Like when Mum was sick and the doctors kept saying different things. Caleb's directness was both a gift and a challenge. Something like that. I'm trying to figure out what's best for everyone. Caleb considered this while finishing his last spoonful. When I can't decide something, Mum used to say to do what makes your heart feel lightest. The simplicity of the advice, filtered through Rachel's remembered wisdom, struck Kevin with unexpected force. His heart hadn't felt truly light in 3 years, but he recognized the truth in the guidance. Keeping Montgomery's secret weighed heavier than the prospect of sharing it with Sarah. Smart mum you had there, Kevin said softly. Yep. Caleb rinsed his bowl in the sink, a recent independence he'd insisted upon. Can we still go see the triplets on Saturday? That's the plan. Good. Hazel's going to teach me to play checkers. She says she never loses. Kevin dropped Caleb at school with a hug that lasted a beat longer than usual, then headed to Carter's garage. Marvin had already started on Sarah's car, the damaged fender removed, replacement parts arranged neatly on a workbench. Montgomery, and called again, Marvin said without looking up from the invoice he was reviewing. Asked if you'd decided about the Mustang job. I'll take it, Kevin replied, pulling on his work coveralls. But I need to talk to Sarah Edwards first. Her car ready for pickup tomorrow? Should be, if the paint dries right. Marvin gave him a speculative look. Everything okay with you? Been distracted since you met with Montgomery. Kevin considered confiding in Marvin, then thought better of it. The older man meant well, but Eagle Point thrived on gossip. Just figuring out logistics. Think I could borrow the shop truck to deliver her car tomorrow? Sure, not like I'm using it. Marvin hesitated, then added, that Edwards woman and her girls, they seem nice. Been a while since I've seen you or Caleb connect with anyone new. The observation, unexpected from his typically gruff employer, caught Kevin off guard. They are nice. They've been through a lot. Haven't we all? Marvin returned to his invoices with a non-committal grunt. The day passed in the rhythm of routine repairs. Oil changes, brake pads, a stubborn alternator. Kevin worked steadily, letting the familiar tasks occupy his hands while his mind continued to wrestle with Montgomery's revelations. By late afternoon, he'd made his decision. He would tell Sarah tomorrow when delivering her car, giving her the complete truth and letting her determine what relationship, if any, she wanted with Alexander Montgomery. After work, Kevin drove to Lakeview, ostensibly to check final details on Sarah's car repairs, but primarily to see the school library where she'd started working. The elementary school building was quiet in late afternoon, most students gone, teachers preparing for the next day in the hushed aftermath of dismissal. He found the library easily enough, a bright space with low shelves accessible to small hands, reading nooks with cushions and walls decorated with oversized book covers. Sarah stood on a small stepladder, arranging books on an upper shelf, her splintered arm making the work awkward but not impossible. Need a taller assistant, Kevin called softly. She turned, surprise giving way to a warm smile. Kevin, what brings you to Lakeview? Checking on your car, should be ready tomorrow. He moved closer, taking a book from her hand and placing it easily on the shelf she'd been struggling to reach. Thought I'd see how the new job was going. It's wonderful. Sarah stepped down from the ladder, her enthusiasm evident. The previous librarian left everything perfectly organized, and the children here are so engaged. The triplets are already making friends in their classes. She looked different somehow, more relaxed perhaps, or simply more at home. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her work attire simple but professional. Only the splint on her arm remained as evidence. Of their dramatic first meeting. Where are the girls? Kevin asked, noting the quiet library. After school program until 5. It's included with my job benefits, which is... She shook her head slightly. Another unexpected blessing. The phrase reminded Kevin of his purpose. Sarah, there's something I need to talk to you about. Something important. She must have registered the shift in his tone. Her expression grew serious as she gestured toward a small office at the back of the library. Let's sit down. Would you like some tea? The teachers here are serious about their break. Room supplies. The office was hardly larger than a closet, but neatly arranged with a desk, 2 chairs, and a small bookshelf already filled with what appeared to be Sarah's personal collection. A framed photograph of the triplets as toddlers sat beside a military portrait of a young man in uniform, Daniel Edwards, Kevin presumed. This isn't easy, Kevin began after declining the tea offer. It's about Alexander Montgomery. Sarah tilted her head slightly. The man who requested you for his car restoration. What about him? He's the one who's been helping you. The rental, house, the car repairs, the job waiting for you, all arranged by Montgomery. Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to wariness. How do you know this? He told me himself last night. Kevin leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But there's more to it. The reason he's helping isn't random charity. It's because... He hesitated, then continued gently. Sarah, Alexander Montgomery is your father-in-law, the triplets' grandfather. The color drained from Sarah's face. She sat perfectly still, only her eyes revealing the shock as they widened slightly. That's not possible. Daniel's father was Thomas Edwards. He died before we met. Not Daniel's father, his mother's father. Kevin kept his voice steady. Montgomery had a daughter named Caroline who married Daniel against her father's wishes. He disowned her and then she died giving birth to the triplets, Sarah finished, her voice hollow. Daniel told me his wife's family had rejected them completely, but he never mentioned names or details. She pressed a hand to her mouth. All this time we've been struggling, moving from place to place, and their grandfather was a wealthy man who regrets his choices, Kevin supplied. He's been looking for you for months. The accident brought you to my attention, and I was already on his radar because of my father's history with his company. Sarah stood abruptly, moving to the small window that overlooked the playground. Why didn't he just introduce himself? Why all the secret arrangements and anonymous help? He believed you'd reject any direct contact after how he treated Daniel. And the girls. He was right. The edge in Sarah's voice was sharp enough to cut. Daniel wrote to him before his final deployment, begging him to reconcile for the girls' sake. I found the letter after he died, unsent. I mailed it myself, along with the notification of Daniel's death. She turned back to Kevin, eyes bright with unshed tears. His assistant returned it unopened, with a note saying Mr. Montgomery wasn't interested in correspondence. Kevin winced at the cruelty of it. He told me he regrets that decision more than anything. Regret doesn't feed 3 hungry children for 4 years. The bitterness in her voice was tempered by exhaustion. It doesn't pay medical bills when they get sick, or explain why they have no family besides their mother. Kevin nodded, understanding her anger. He's not asking for forgiveness. He wants a chance to know them, to provide for them, to be part of their lives in whatever way you'll allow. Sarah sank back into her chair, the initial shock giving way to a complex mixture of emotions that played across her expressive face. The house, the job, my car. It wasn't luck or kindness. It was guilt. Maybe, Kevin acknowledged. But does the motivation matter if it helps give the girls stability? Of course it matters. Sarah's voice rose slightly before she caught herself, glancing toward the open library door. More quietly, she continued, "They're not charity cases. They're children who deserve honesty, not manipulated circumstances." Kevin couldn't argue with her assessment. "What will you tell them?" Sarah exhaled slowly, gathering herself. "The truth, but carefully. They're too young to understand all of it." She looked directly at Kevin. "Did he ask you to arrange a meeting?" "He suggested it. On neutral ground, with me present if you wanted." "Why you? Because you fixed his car once." Kevin hesitated, then decided complete honesty was necessary. "No, because my father's garage was foreclosed on by Montgomery Financial 15 years ago. The stress contributed to his death." He met her surprised gaze steadily. "Montgomery seems to think that makes me an objective party, someone who has no reason to favor him, but who has your trust." Sarah processed this new information, her analytical mind visibly working through implications. "So this isn't just about me and the girls, it's about you too." "I'm not looking for anything from Montgomery," Kevin clarified. "I just thought you deserved to know the whole truth." A bell rang somewhere in the school building, signaling the transition to the final hour of after-school programs. Sarah glanced at her watch. "The girls will be finished soon. I need time to think about all this." "Of course." Kevin stood, recognizing her need for space. "I'll bring your car by tomorrow afternoon if that works." Sarah nodded, still visibly processing. At the office door, she stopped him with a light touch on his arm. "Thank you for telling me, for being honest when no one else has been." The sincerity in her voice affirmed his decision, lifting some of the weight from his shoulders. "That's what friends do, right? Is that what we are?" The question held no challenge, only genuine curiosity. Kevin considered the trajectory of their brief but intense acquaintance. "I'd like to think so." A small smile touched her lips. "So would I." Outside the school, Kevin paused to watch children playing on the playground equipment, their carefree voices carrying across the afternoon air. Somewhere among them, the triplets were discovering their new environment, making friends, establishing routines. Their lives were about to change again, with the revelation of a grandfather they never knew existed. He hoped the foundation they'd begun to build here would be strong enough to withstand the adjustment. The next day, Kevin delivered Sarah's repaired car as promised. The damage had been expertly fixed, the vehicle looking better than when he'd first seen it half submerged in the roadside ditch. The triplets were at school, allowing for an uninterrupted conversation on the small front porch of the rental house. "It looks brand new," Sarah remarked, running her hand along the freshly painted fender. "Marvin does good work." Kevin handed her the keys and a folder containing the insurance paperwork, all showing premiums paid for the next 6 months. "Everything's taken care of." Sarah accepted the folder without opening it, her expression suggesting she understood exactly what taken care of meant. "I spoke with the school principal this morning. Apparently my position is funded by a special grant from the Montgomery Educational Foundation." "Does that change how you feel about the job?" She considered the question seriously. "I'm good at what I do. The children need a librarian who cares about connecting them with the right books. My feelings about Alexander Montgomery don't change that." Kevin nodded, respecting her practical approach. "Have you decided about meeting him?" "Yes." Sarah tucked the folder under her uninjured arm. "This weekend, after the girls have had a chance to process the basic information they should know. They have a grandfather before they meet him." "Where?" "Neutral ground, like he suggested. The park with the pond that Hazel mentioned to Caleb." She met his gaze directly. "Will you come? Bring Caleb? The girls will be more comfortable with friends. Present, of course." The request relieved him. He'd been concerned about Sarah facing this pivotal meeting alone. "Saturday morning, we were planning to visit anyway." Sarah nodded. "I'll tell them tomorrow night. Just the essentials, that their mother's father lives nearby, that he's been too sick to meet them until now." Sick? A hint of steel entered her expression. A sickness of the heart is still a sickness, and it's more understandable to children than explaining that their grandfather rejected them because of pride. Kevin couldn't argue with her logic or her protective instinct. "I'll let Montgomery know." "Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "For everything. Finding us in that ditch, taking us in, being honest when it would have been easier not to be." "You'd have done the same," Kevin said simply. "I'd like to think so." Sarah's smile held a touch of sadness. Life rarely gives us easy choices, does it? As Kevin drove back to Eagle Point, he found himself thinking about choices, those made rashly in moments of anger, like Montgomery disowning his daughter, those made deliberately in crisis, like his own decision to help strangers in a storm, and those still to come, hanging in the balance of Saturday's meeting. That evening, after Caleb was asleep, Kevin called the number on Montgomery's business card. Wilson answered, his precise voice recognizable immediately. "Mr. Harper, Mr. Montgomery was hoping to hear from you." "I've spoken with Sarah Edwards," Kevin said without preamble. "She's willing to meet on Saturday morning at Lakeview Gardens, the park near her house, with the children." A pause followed, then Wilson's voice returned, slightly less formal. "That is unexpected good news. I'll inform Mr. Montgomery immediately." "She's doing this for the girls, not for him," Kevin cautioned. "She hasn't forgotten how he treated them when they needed him most." "Understood." Wilson's tone suggested he comprehended more than just Kevin's words. "Will you be present as well?" "She asked me to be there, with my son." "Very good. Mr. Montgomery will be most appreciative." Kevin ended the call feeling as though he'd just scheduled a diplomatic summit rather than a family reunion. In many ways, perhaps it was both. Representatives of different factions meeting to determine whether peace was possible after years of Cold War. He moved through the quiet house, straightening cushions and gathering dishes that had migrated to the living room. These simple routines had become his anchor after Rachel died, a way to maintain order when everything else felt chaotic. Now they served as meditation while he contemplated what Saturday might bring for two families on the verge of colliding, his own included. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a wrench, Caleb had pinned a drawing of 6 figures holding hands, himself and Kevin alongside the Edwards family, rendered in the blunt honesty of children's art. The triplets were distinguished by differently colored dresses but identical smiling faces. Above them all, a bright yellow sun beamed down, its rays extending to touch each figure. Kevin studied the image, recognizing it as Caleb's perspective on their unexpected connection. Children saw things simply. People who cared about each other belonged together. Adults complicated matters with history, resentment, and fear. Outside, an early spring rain began to fall, gentle and cleansing against the windows. Kevin thought of Sarah preparing her daughters for the revelation that would reshape their understanding of family. He thought of Montgomery, perhaps sitting alone in his mansion, anticipating a meeting that represented either redemption or final rejection. And he thought of his own place in this unfolding story, not merely an observer, but a participant drawn in by chance and choice alike. Saturday approached like a destination at the end of a winding road, visible now through the trees but still surrounded by unknowns. Whatever awaited them all at that park bench beside the pond, Kevin knew with certainty that nothing would be quite the same afterward. Saturday arrived beneath a sky scrubbed clean by overnight rain, the world rinsed to a sparkling clarity that seemed deliberate in its timing. Kevin woke before his alarm, lying still for a moment as sunlight filtered through the bedroom blinds. The day ahead loomed with significance, a meeting that could heal wounds or deepen them, depending on words yet unspoken and reactions impossible to predict. Caleb was already awake, sitting cross-legged on his bed arranging colored pencils when Kevin checked on him. The boy looked up with unusual seriousness in his young face. "Dad, is today when the triplets meet their grandfather?" Kevin leaned against the doorframe, still surprised by his son's perceptiveness. "Yes. How did you know about that?" Hazel called. "Me yesterday after school. Mrs. Edwards let her use the phone." Caleb carefully aligned a blue pencil with its companions. "She said they just found out they have a grandfather who lives in the big house on the hill, but she doesn't know why he never visited them before." Kevin approached, sitting on the edge of the bed. "What did you tell her?" "That sometimes grown-ups make mistakes they don't know how to fix." Caleb glanced up. "That's what you told me when I asked why Grandpa never visited Mom in the hospital." The comparison caught Kevin off guard. His own father's inability to face mortality, to witness his daughter-in-law's decline. The parallel to Montgomery's failure was uncomfortable, but apt. "That was a good answer," Kevin acknowledged. "How did Hazel seem about meeting him?" "Worried, but she said she has to be brave for Claire and Lillian." Caleb's matter-of-fact report conveyed the weight of responsibility already settling on the oldest triplet's shoulders. "She asked if we would get there first, before him." "We can do that." Kevin ruffled his son's hair. "Ready for breakfast?" They arrived at Lakeview Gardens 30 minutes before the arranged meeting time. The park stretched along the edge of a small man-made pond, walking paths curving between flowering shrubs and newly leafed trees. Weekend visitors were sparse this early. A few joggers, an elderly couple feeding ducks, a young woman sketching on a bench. Sarah and the triplets waited near the playground, the girls taking turns on a swing set while their mother watched from a nearby bench. All three wore matching yellow dresses beneath light jackets, their hair arranged in identical braids. The coordinated appearance, Kevin suspected, was deliberate, a statement of unity before confronting the unknown. "We brought donuts," Caleb announced as they approached, holding up a bakery box with pride. "The kind with sprinkles for everyone, and one plain for Lillian because she doesn't like sweet things." Sarah smiled, the tension in her shoulders visibly easing at their arrival. "That was thoughtful. Girls, look who's here." The triplets abandoned the swings in a flurry of yellow fabric and excited voices. Hazel reached them first, her greeting directed specifically to Kevin. "Did you talk to him? Our grandfather, what's he like?" Before Kevin could respond, Sarah intervened gently. "Hazel, remember what we discussed. We're all going to meet him together. No rushing ahead with questions." Hazel subsided, though her expressive eyes remained fixed on Kevin with unmistakable curiosity. Claire moved closer to her mother while Lillian simply observed, her gaze tracking between the adults as if cataloging reactions for later analysis. Kevin settled on the bench beside Sarah. "How are you holding up?" "I didn't sleep much," she admitted quietly. "I told them last night, just the basics, that their mother's father has been living nearby, that he's been unwell, but wants very much to meet them now." "How did they take it?" Sarah watched as Caleb showed the girls a small toy car he'd brought, the four children huddled together on the playground edge. Hazel had the most questions, as you'd expect. Why he never visited, why we never talked about him. Claire just wanted to know if he was nice, and Lillian, she smiled faintly, Lillian wanted to know if he has a library in his house. Kevin chuckled. Priorities. She's never changed. Sarah's expression grew more serious. I didn't tell them about the money, the house, any of that. They're too young to understand the implications. I think that's wise. A sleek black car pulled into the parking area, drawing their attention. Even at a distance, the vehicle's elegant. Lines and tinted windows marked it as unusual for Lakeview. James Wilson emerged from the driver's seat, circling to open the rear door with practiced precision. Alexander Montgomery stepped out slowly, the morning sunlight emphasizing both his dignified bearing and the signs of age typically hidden in dimmer settings. He wore casual clothing, khaki pants, a navy sweater over a collared shirt, but the quality was evident even from a distance. Wilson handed him a walking cane, which Montgomery accepted with a slight nod, before making his way toward the playground. "He looks different than I expected," Sarah murmured, her posture straightening as if preparing for confrontation. Kevin understood her meaning. Despite his wealth and influence, Montgomery appeared fundamentally human in the clear morning light. An elderly man approaching with careful steps, his expression a mixture of determination and unmistakable nervousness. The triplets noticed the newcomers, their playground chatter falling silent. Hazel immediately moved closer to her sisters, her protective instinct visible in the way she positioned herself slightly in front. Caleb, sensing the shift, stepped back toward Kevin with questioning eyes. Sarah rose as Montgomery approached, her splinted arm held slightly away from her body, her other hand resting protectively on Claire's shoulder. The physical distance between the two parties, perhaps 15 feet, seemed to stretch with emotional significance. "Mrs. Edwards." Montgomery stopped at a respectful distance, his voice steady despite the visible tension in his bearing. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Sarah nodded once, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Montgomery." Kevin remained seated, understanding that this initial exchange belonged to them alone. The triplets pressed close to their mother, three identical. Faces regarding the stranger, with expressions ranging from wary curiosity to open suspicion. These must be... Montgomery's voice faltered slightly as he took in the sight of his granddaughters. Something flickered across his features. Recognition, perhaps, of elements of his daughter in their faces. "Yes?" Sarah's response was clipped but not unkind. "Girls, this is Mr. Montgomery, your grandfather." Montgomery's grip visibly tightened on his cane. "Hello, girls. He paused, seeming to reconsider rehearsed words. "I've waited a very long time to meet you." Hazel, never one to remain silent when questions burned inside her, stepped forward half a pace. "If you wanted to meet us, why didn't you come before? When our dad died?" The direct question, delivered with a child's unerring aim for the heart of the matter, landed like a physical blow. Montgomery's composed exterior wavered momentarily. "Hazel," Sarah cautioned softly. "No, it's a fair question." Montgomery met the girl's challenging gaze. "I made a terrible mistake. I was angry with your mother for reasons that seemed important then but weren't really, and after she died I was too proud to admit I was wrong." He spoke simply, without condescension or evasion. "By the time I realized how foolish I'd been, many years had passed." Hazel considered this with the serious concentration of a judge, weighing testimony. "Our dad wrote you letters, Mom told us." "He did. I didn't read them." Montgomery's admission carried the weight of genuine regret. "That was another mistake. One I can never fully repair, but hope someday to be forgiven for." Claire, who had been half hidden behind her mother, peered around Sarah's leg. "Are you really sick? Mom said you were sick." A flicker of confusion crossed Montgomery's face before understanding dawned. He glanced at Sarah, something like gratitude in his expression for the gentle explanation she'd offered. The children. "I was sick," he confirmed, placing a hand over his heart. "Not the kind of sickness doctors can cure easily, but I'm getting better." Lillian, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. Do you have a library in your house? The unexpected question broke the tension. Montgomery smiled, a genuine expression that softened the austere lines of his face, revealing glimpses of the younger man he had once been. I do, actually. Quite a large one. Your grandmother started it, and I've added to it over the years. Can I see it sometime? Lillian's directness matched her sister's. Though her interest lay in different territory, Montgomery looked to Sarah, careful not to presume. If your mother thinks that would be all right, I'd be honored to show you. A delicate silence followed. The conversation having reached its first crucial junction, Kevin caught Sarah's eye, offering silent support, but leaving the decision entirely to her. She drew a deep breath. Perhaps we could all sit down, she suggested, gesturing toward a nearby picnic table. The girls brought some questions they wrote down last night. It was a small concession, but significant. Montgomery's relief was almost palpable as he nodded. I'd be happy to answer anything they want to ask. The group relocated to the table, the children naturally arranging themselves with Hazel, Claire, and Lillian on one side beside their mother, Montgomery on the opposite bench, and Kevin and Caleb at the end, neutral territory between the factions. Wilson remained at a discreet distance, standing near a flowering dogwood tree. Hazel produced a slightly crumpled sheet of notebook paper from her jacket pocket, smoothing it with determined care. We made a list. Lillian helped with the spelling. I see. Montgomery regarded the paper with appropriate seriousness. Very organized. Number 1, Hazel read with careful precision. What was our mother's name and what did she look like? A shadow of old grief passed across Montgomery's face. From an inner pocket, he withdrew a small photograph protected in a clear sleeve. Her name was Caroline Elizabeth Montgomery Edwards. This was taken on her 16th birthday. He passed the photograph to Sarah first, a gesture of respect that didn't go unnoticed. She studied it briefly, a complicated emotion flickering in her eyes before she handed it to the triplets. The girls bent their heads together over the image. A pretty teenage girl with auburn hair and a wide smile, seated before a birthday cake ablaze with candles. The resemblance to the triplets was unmistakable, particularly around the eyes and the shape of the face. She's beautiful, Claire whispered. She looks like us, Lillian observed. Like you, especially, Montgomery said gently to Lillian. She loved books just as much as you do. Her room was always filled with them. Hazel consulted her list again. Number 2, did you know our dad? I met him several times, Montgomery answered. He was a fine young man, very determined, very principled. He loved your mother deeply. But you didn't like him, Hazel pressed, reading between the lines with remarkable acuity for a 7-year-old. Montgomery hesitated, clearly weighing truth against tact. I didn't know him well enough to make that judgment. I was wrong to assume I did. The questioning continued, moving through the careful list. Montgomery answered each with genuine thoughtfulness, neither sugarcoating the past nor burdening the children with details beyond their understanding. He spoke of Caroline's childhood, her love of horses, her talent for piano. He described the house where their mother had grown up, the gardens she had helped plant, the tree house that still stood in the old oak behind the estate. Kevin watched, the triplets gradually relax, their natural curiosity overcoming initial wariness. Even Hazel's interrogatory tone softened as Montgomery shared stories and memories that filled gaps in their understanding of their own history. Sarah remained watchful, but not interfering, allowing the conversation to unfold at its own pace. The last question was answered. Do you have any pets? Not currently, but there's certainly room for some. Caleb spoke up from his place at the end of the table. Can we feed the ducks now? They look hungry. The simple request, focused on immediate childhood concerns rather than complex family history, provided a natural transition. Montgomery produced a small bag of appropriate duck feed from his pocket, prepared, it seemed, for every contingency. "Store-bought," he explained, as Sarah raised an eyebrow. "The park has signs asking visitors not to feed them bread." The children moved to the pond's edge under Sarah's watchful eye, leaving Kevin and Montgomery at the table momentarily. The older man watched the triplets with unconcealed wonder, as if still adjusting to the reality of their existence. "They're remarkable children," Montgomery said quietly. "You've done an extraordinary job raising them," he added, looking towards Sarah by the water. "She has," Kevin agreed, "often alone, with far fewer resources than should have been available." To them, Montgomery accepted the gentle rebuke with a nod. "A situation I hope to remedy, if she'll allow it. That will be her decision." Kevin studied the older man. "What exactly are you hoping for here, Montgomery?" "A chance." The answer came without hesitation. Not to replace memories of their father or to buy forgiveness with material things, just to know them, to be part of their lives in whatever capacity Sarah deems appropriate. Kevin considered this. "And if that's limited to occasional supervised visits, birthday cards, nothing more, then I'll be grateful for that much." Montgomery's gaze remained on the children as they scattered feed for the eagerly gathering ducks. "When you reach my age, Harper, you realize how precious second chances are, how rarely they come around." A shout from the pond interrupted their conversation. Claire had accidentally dropped her entire portion of feed, creating a minor feeding frenzy among the ducks. Her distress was immediate and vocal. Before either man could react, Montgomery was already moving toward her, his cane forgotten against the bench. Kevin watched as the elderly man reached the water's edge with surprising quickness, producing a handkerchief for Claire's tears and offering calm reassurance. The little girl's distress faded as Montgomery knelt carefully beside her, despite his age and the certain discomfort of the position, to point out a particularly colorful mallard approaching for the scattered feast. The sight, a grandfather, comforting his granddaughter in a moment of childish distress, held a simple rightness that transcended the complicated history between them. Sarah seemed to recognize it too, her expression softening as she observed the interaction. For a moment, with morning sunlight dancing across the pond's surface and children's laughter rising into the spring air, the weight of past mistakes seemed to lift slightly, not erased, but perhaps balanced by the possibility of something new taking root in its place. Caleb rejoined Kevin at the table, breathless from running around the pond's perimeter. "I think they like him," he observed simply. "He knows stuff about ducks." "Knowing stuff about ducks is important," Kevin agreed solemnly. "Do you think they'll visit his big house? It probably has good hiding places." "That's up to their mom," Kevin explained. "But maybe, eventually." Caleb nodded, accepting this adult complexity with a child's practicality. "I hope so. Hazel wants to see if he has horses." The morning extended beyond its planned duration, conversation flowing more easily. As initial tensions eased, when Wilson finally approached to murmur a discreet reminder of Montgomery's afternoon appointment, there was genuine regret in the older man's expression. "I'm afraid I have to leave," he told the triplets, who had gradually drawn closer throughout the morning, "but I very much enjoyed meeting you all. Will we see you again?" Claire asked directly, her earlier shyness replaced by cautious engagement. Montgomery looked to Sarah, allowing her to answer. "We can arrange another visit soon," she said after a moment's consideration. "Perhaps next weekend." Relief and gratitude flickered across Montgomery's features. "I'd like that very much." As he prepared to depart, Montgomery approached Sarah directly. "Thank you for today, for giving me this opportunity despite every reason not to." "I'm doing what's best for my daughters," she replied, her tone not unkind. but clear in its boundaries. They deserve to know their family history, their roots. Of course. Montgomery hesitated, then added, Daniel would be proud of the mother you've become, the strength you've shown. Something in Sarah's carefully maintained composure wavered at the mention of her late husband. She nodded once, unable or unwilling to respond verbally. As Montgomery walked back toward the waiting car, his gait slightly stiff from kneeling by the pond, Kevin found himself wondering whether true reconciliation was possible after such deep wounds, or if the best they could hope for was a fragile peace built on cautious goodwill and the passage of time. The answer, he suspected, would emerge gradually in the weeks and months ahead, written not in grand gestures or formal agreements but in small moments of connection. A grandfather sharing duck facts with wide-eyed children. A mother allowing space for new relationships to form. 3 little girls discovering branches of their family tree previously unknown. Only time would reveal whether today's careful beginning would flourish or falter. But as Kevin watched the black car drive away and saw the triplets already engaged in animated discussion with Sarah about their impressions, he felt something like optimism taking root alongside the dogwoods and cherry trees of Lakeview Gardens. The tentative promise of healing where once there had been only absence and regret. 3 weeks passed, spring settling fully over Eagle Point and Lakeview in a gentle progression of blossoms and birdsong. The Saturday meetings at the park became a regular fixture, sometimes with Kevin and Caleb present, occasionally just Sarah and the triplets spending time with Alexander Montgomery as tentative bridges formed across years of absence. Small steps, carefully taken, but steps nonetheless. Kevin divided his time between routine repairs at Carter's garage and the restoration of Montgomery's Mustang, which had been moved to a dedicated workshop on the Richardson estate. The project offered both professional satisfaction and unexpected moments of connection, Montgomery often joining him for an hour or two, discussing carburetor options or paint finishes with the enthusiasm of a much younger man. On this particular Saturday, heavy rain pounded against the workshop windows. The scheduled park meeting cancelled in favor of an invitation Kevin hadn't anticipated. Sarah had agreed to bring the triplets to the Richardson estate for the first time, a significant milestone in the gradually warming relationship. Kevin and Caleb had been included, partly as familiar support for the girls, but also, Kevin suspected, as a buffer Sarah still felt necessary. "Will you attach the original hood ornament or use the reproduction?" Montgomery asked, examining the 2 options laid out on a polishing cloth. "Original," Kevin replied, wiping grease from his hands. "It needs rechroming, but the detail is better. The reproduction is too uniform, lacks character." Montgomery nodded approvingly. "I agree. Authenticity matters, even in small details." The statement carried weight beyond automotive restoration. Kevin had noticed Montgomery's meticulous approach to rebuilding relationships with his granddaughters. The careful study of their interests, the thoughtful gifts selected for individuality rather than extravagance, the patient acceptance of Hazel's continuing wariness. A discreet knock interrupted their conversation. Wilson appeared at the workshop door, his usual composure slightly disturbed by what appeared to be genuine excitement. "They've arrived, sir. I've shown them to the library as requested." Montgomery straightened, brushing invisible dust from his sweater. "Thank you, James. We'll be right there." He glanced at Kevin. "Are you ready?" The question carried layers of meaning beyond the immediate moment. Kevin nodded, setting aside his tools. Sarah texted that the girls have been talking about this visit all week, especially Lillian. "The library has been prepared with that in mind," Montgomery replied, a hint of grandfatherly conspiracy in his tone. "I hope it meets with her approval." They walked together through a covered breezeway, connecting the garage to the main house, rain drumming steadily on the roof above them. Kevin had been in the main residence several times now, but its grandeur remained impressive. The Richardson estate was effectively a small mansion, built in the 1920s and maintained with meticulous care through generations. The library occupied much of the east wing, a two-story space with floor-to-ceiling shelves accessible by rolling ladders, comfortable reading nooks tucked between windows, and a massive stone fireplace currently crackling with a welcoming blaze against the rainy day. Sarah and the triplets stood near the center of the room, the girls wide-eyed as they took in the thousands of volumes surrounding them. Caleb had already made himself comfortable in a window seat, a large illustrated book about vintage automobiles. Open on his lap, he looked up as Kevin and Montgomery entered, offering a casual wave that suggested his initial awe of the surroundings had quickly given way to comfortable exploration. "This is bigger than the school library," Lillian breathed, her usual reserve completely abandoned as she turned in a slow circle, neck craned to see the upper shelves. "Much bigger," Sarah agreed, her own expression suggesting she was not immune to the room's charm, despite her lingering caution toward its owner. "The children's section is over here," Montgomery said, gesturing to a corner where lower shelves, comfortable cushions, and a small table had been arranged. "It was rather limited until recently, but I've made some additions I thought might be of interest." The additions were immediately apparent. Several shelves of new children's books, arranged by age and subject. Lillian moved toward them, as if drawn by gravity, Claire following close behind. Hazel remained near her mother, watching Montgomery with cautious assessment. "Do you really read all these books?" she asked, gesturing to the surrounding walls of leather-bound volumes. "Many of them, yes," Montgomery replied, "though I confess some were collected by my father and grandfather more for appearance than content." Hazel considered this with characteristic seriousness. "That seems wasteful." "It is," Montgomery agreed without defensiveness. "Books should be read, not merely displayed. Perhaps you can help me determine which ones deserve more attention." The subtle invitation, acknowledging her judgment as valuable, earned a brief but genuine smile from Hazel before she joined her sisters at the children's shelves. Sarah watched them with the vigilant attention Kevin had come to recognize. No, not fearful exactly, but prepared for any sign of discomfort or distress. "The house is beautiful," she offered, her first unprompted compliment to Montgomery. "I can see why Lillian has been so eager to visit." "It was built to impress," Montgomery replied with a self-deprecating smile. "But a house only becomes a home when filled with the right people. It's been rather empty for many years." The statement hung in the air, its implications clear. Sarah acknowledged it with a slight nod, but offered no response. Her boundaries, still carefully maintained despite the gradual thawing between them. "Perhaps a tour while the children explore the library?" Montgomery suggested. "Or would you prefer to stay with them?" Sarah hesitated, glancing at Kevin. "Would you mind keeping an eye on the girls for a few minutes?" "Not at all," Kevin assured her. "Caleb and I have it covered." As Sarah and Montgomery departed for an abbreviated tour of the house, Kevin settled into an armchair near where the triplets were already engrossed in their discoveries. Claire had found a book of fairy tales with elaborate illustrations. Lillian was examining a children's encyclopedia with scientific precision, and Hazel had somewhat surprisingly selected a volume about horses. "Mr. Montgomery said he used to have horses here," she informed Kevin, without looking up from a picture of Arabians. "A long time ago, when their mom was little." "Did he mention if he might get horses again?" Kevin asked, recognizing Hazel's thinly veiled interest. She shrugged with studied casualness. "Maybe. He asked if any of us liked riding." "And do you?" "Never tried it." Hazel turned a page, then added, "But I might, if there was a chance." The subtle negotiation, Hazel's gradual willingness to consider a relationship with her grandfather, contingent on horses being part of the equation, brought a smile to Kevin's face. Children had their own diplomatic strategies, less sophisticated but often more effective than adult versions. The rain continued its steady percussion against the windows, creating a cozy atmosphere that encouraged lingering. Wilson appeared, with hot chocolate and cookies served on a silver tray with cloth napkins that somehow didn't feel pretentious, but rather like a special occasion warranting proper presentation. When Sarah and Montgomery returned almost 40 minutes later, the scene had evolved naturally. Claire was showing Caleb how to draw a dragon based on one in her book. Lillian had accumulated a stack of volumes she hoped to borrow, and Hazel was examining a framed photograph of Caroline atop a chestnut mare that Montgomery had mentioned during their conversation. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked, her gaze quickly assessing her daughters. "Perfect," Kevin assured her. "Lillian's already planning a weekly visitation schedule for the library." Sarah laughed, the sound more relaxed than Kevin had heard in their presence before. "I'm not surprised. She'd move in here if it meant unlimited reading time." "She would be most welcome," Montgomery replied, the offer casual enough not to pressure, but sincere enough to be meaningful. "All of you would." The moment might have veered into awkwardness, but Lillian chose that moment to approach, struggling slightly with the weight of her selected books. "Mom, can I borrow these?" "Mr. Montgomery says it's okay." Sarah examined the ambitious stack. "That's quite a lot, Lillian. Are you sure you can read all these before they need to be returned? She can keep them as long as she likes," Montgomery said. "Or they can stay here for her next visit. Either way." Lillian considered the options with characteristic thoughtfulness. "I'll take 3 now and save the rest for next time." The deliberate presumption of a next time was not lost on the adults. As the afternoon progressed, they moved to the estate's sunroom for lunch, a bright, glass-enclosed space where the drumming rain created a soothing backdrop to conversation. The meal was simple but elegant, clearly planned with children's preferences in mind, while offering adult options as well. Kevin noticed the careful attention to detail, how Montgomery had remembered Lillian's dislike of sweet things, Claire's preference for crusts removed from sandwiches, Hazel's fondness for apples over other fruits. Small observations translated into thoughtful accommodations, building trust one sandwich and correctly sliced fruit at a time. "The restoration is progressing well," Montgomery remarked to Sarah as the meal concluded. "Kevin has a remarkable talent for bringing old things back to life." "He does," Sarah agreed, her gaze meeting Kevin's briefly. "We're living proof of that." The acknowledgement, the first time she'd openly referenced how their lives had intersected through the accident, carried significance beyond the casual words. Kevin felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. "The whole engine needed rebuilding," he explained, redirecting attention from himself. "But the body had good bones. Sometimes that's all you need to start with." Montgomery nodded, understanding the parallel. "Indeed, the foundation matters most. Everything else can be restored with enough care and the right approach." After lunch, the rain eased enough for Montgomery to suggest a brief tour of the grounds. Under clearing skies, they explored the estate's gardens, the children darting ahead on paths still puddled from the morning's downpour. An impressive treehouse, the one Montgomery had mentioned from Caroline's childhood, drew excited gasps from all 4 children. "Can we go up?" Hazel asked, already assessing the ladder with calculating eyes. "It was recently reinforced and inspected," Montgomery assured Sarah. "It's perfectly safe." The children needed no further encouragement, scrambling up the wooden rungs, with Caleb gallantly allowing the triplets to ascend first. Their delighted exclamations filtered down as they discovered the space above, windows on all sides, built-in, benches, even a small table. Caroline spent hours up there, Montgomery said softly, his gaze fixed on the weathered structure. Reading, drawing, watching the sunset. It was her sanctuary. Sarah studied the treehouse, then the man beside her. Thank you for sharing these memories with them. It means more than you might realize. I have photographs, Montgomery offered. Albums full of Caroline growing up. When you feel it's appropriate, I'd like the girls to have them. I'd like that too, Sarah replied, surprising both men with her ready agreement. They should know their mother's story. The afternoon concluded with an unexpected moment of connection. As they prepared to leave, Montgomery presented each triplet with a carefully chosen parting gift. For Lillian, a journal bound in soft leather with her name embossed on the cover. For Claire, an art set with professional quality colored pencils. And for Hazel, a silver charm bracelet with a single charm, a small, perfectly detailed horse. There's room to add more, Montgomery explained, as Hazel examined it with uncharacteristic speechlessness. Perhaps each time you visit, if you'd like, the simple strategy, creating a physical representation of a relationship-building charm by charm, visit by visit, was both transparent and effective. Hazel nodded, allowing her grandfather to fasten the bracelet around her wrist. Thank you, she said, the words genuine if still careful. Sarah accepted the gifts with grace, the wariness in her eyes noticeably diminished from previous encounters. We'll see you next Saturday, weather permitting. I'll look forward to it. Montgomery's response was measured, avoiding the eagerness that might have pressured or overwhelmed. The library will be waiting for Lillian. Kevin lingered briefly after Sarah and the children moved toward the car. That went well, he observed, studying the older man's expression. Better than I dared hope. Montgomery's usually controlled demeanor revealed genuine emotion. It's a beginning, at least. Sarah's thawing, Kevin confirmed. The girls are connecting with you in their own ways. And you, Montgomery asked with surprising directness, has your perspective changed? Kevin considered the question seriously. You hurt my father through business decisions you made. That's still true. He paused, then continued. But I've seen how you are with those girls. How much you want to make amends. That matters. I'm grateful for your willingness to facilitate. This, Montgomery said, without your intervention, I might never have had the opportunity. Just don't waste it, Kevin replied, his tone friendly, but carrying unmistakable weight. They've all been disappointed enough. The drive back to Lakeview was filled with excited chatter, the triplets comparing notes on the library, the treehouse, the charm bracelet that Hazel hadn't stopped touching since it was fastened around her wrist. Caleb contributed his own observations about the garage and the vintage cars, his usual reserve transformed into animated descriptions. When they reached Sarah's house, the rain had stopped completely, leaving the world washed clean and fragrant. The triplets rushed inside to find proper places for their gifts, leaving Sarah and Kevin momentarily alone on the front porch. That was a significant step today, Kevin observed. Going to the estate? Sarah nodded, leaning against the porch, railing. It felt right somehow, seeing where their mother grew up, where she played. She smiled faintly. Lillian hasn't stopped talking about the library since we first mentioned it, and Hazel seems intrigued by the horses past and potentially future. She's always been the most cautious, Sarah agreed. But that bracelet... She shook her head, slightly. He's really trying, isn't he? Yes, Kevin answered simply. He is. They stood in comfortable silence, the late afternoon sun breaking through dissipating clouds to cast long shadows across the lawn. Inside, the children's voices created a backdrop of overlapping excitement, Caleb apparently now included in whatever plans the triplets were making for their next visit to the estate. Kevin, Sarah's voice was thoughtful. Do you think people can really change? Fundamentally, I mean. He considered the question, thinking of Montgomery's evolution from cold businessman to earnest grandfather, of his own journey from isolated widower to whatever he was becoming now. "I think we can grow," he answered finally. "Build on who we already are, make different choices when we recognize the previous ones were wrong. That's not exactly change, but it's expansion." Sarah nodded slowly. "That makes sense. We don't erase our mistakes or become different people. We just learn, hopefully. Some learn faster than others," Kevin offered with a slight smile. "Montgomery took too long, but he got there eventually. Better late than never, I suppose." Sarah's expression turned reflective. Daniel would have wanted this for the girls. To know their grandfather, their heritage. He was always more forgiving than me. "You're doing what's right for them," Kevin said. "That's what matters." Their conversation was interrupted by Caleb appearing at the door, slightly breathless with excitement. "Dad, Hazel says we're all invited for dinner on Friday. Mr. Montgomery has a chef who makes the best spaghetti in the world." Sarah raised an eyebrow, clearly hearing this invitation for the first time. "Does he now?" "Please, Mom," Hazel called from inside. "He said we could see the garage where Mr. Harper's fixing the car." The enthusiasm, from Hazel of all people, was significant. Sarah met Kevin's eyes, a silent question in her expression. "We'd be happy to join you," he answered, understanding her unspoken request for company in this next step. Caleb's been wanting to see the Mustang in progress. That evening, back in Eagle Point, Kevin sat on his back porch, watching the last light fade from the sky. Caleb had gone to bed exhausted from the day's excitement, the house quiet, except for the occasional distant rumble of thunder as the storm system moved eastward. His phone buzzed with an incoming text from Sarah. "The girls are planning a sleepover in the treehouse when it's fixed up a little more. Apparently Montgomery mentioned adding electricity and proper furniture. Should I be concerned they're being spoiled?" Kevin smiled at the screen. The fact that she was asking his opinion rather than simply shutting down the idea represented significant progress. He typed back, "Maybe, but they're level-headed kids, and they've had so little for so long. A little spoiling might be okay." Her response came quickly. "You're probably right. Lillian has already started a library inventory system. Hazel is researching horse breeds. Claire wants to paint a mural in the treehouse. I've never seen them this excited about anything." "That's a good thing," he replied, "worth the risk of a little spoiling." A longer pause followed before her next message appeared. "Thank you for today, for being there, for all of it, really." Kevin stared at the words, feeling their weight and significance. So much had changed in the weeks since he'd found Sarah and her daughters stranded in the rain. Lives had intersected, healing had begun. Possibilities had emerged where there had once been only isolation and regret. "Anytime," he wrote back simply. Then after a moment's consideration he added, "That's what friends do. Or maybe something more than friends. We're still figuring that out." The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again as Sarah composed her response. Finally, it came through. "Yes, we are, and I'm looking forward to it." Kevin closed his phone, letting the quiet darkness envelop him as he contemplated the journey ahead, not just for Sarah and the triplets as they built a relationship with Alexander Montgomery, but for himself and Caleb as they became increasingly intertwined with this unexpected family constellation. Some restoration projects were challenging, requiring patience and precision, a willingness to strip away damaged layers and carefully rebuild from the foundation. But the results, when approached with skill and care, often exceeded expectations, creating something that honored its origins while embracing new possibility. The night deepened around him, stars emerging one by one above Eagle Point. In Lakeview, those same stars shone over the Richardson estate, over Sarah's small rental house, over the park where unlikely connections had first begun to form. Different locations, different lives, now linked by circumstance, choice, and the remarkable resilience of the human heart. The restoration wasn't complete, may never be fully complete, but the progress was undeniable. And that, Kevin thought, as he finally rose to head inside, was enough for now. More than enough. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss this. Just click to watch. And don't forget to subscribe. It would mean a lot.